Good afternoon and welcome everyone who joined us today. My name is Maria Nazarova. I am the president of the Universal Peace Federation in Russia, and I will be the moderator of today's program. I am very glad to welcome you again to our virtual studio. First of all, I would like to ask everyone to choose the language in which you'd like to listen to today's webinar. Please click the interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen, which looks like a globe, and choose either English or Russian. It is important to choose one of these rather than just leaving the original language, because we will have one panelist who will be speaking in Russian. Today, we are continuing a series of 3 international leadership conferences, which are organized between June and August 2021. The July ILC turns attention to the role of non-state actors, examining a variety of steps that may be taken to contribute to peace and eventual reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula. The theme of this particular webinar is resources and tools of faith-based organizations in support of reuniting the Korean people. Thinking about the reunification of Korea, we think first about different views, ideologies, way of thinking, and people during the process of reunification somehow must find a way to understand each other, to forgive and reconcile. Who, if not religious leaders, those who believe in God, with their understanding of God and their ability to forgive, love, and unite, should set an example for both politicians and the military how to build harmonious relationship. Although this path is not easy for anyone. As religion sees humanity as one large family under God, faith-based organizations have a natural mandate to remedy this troubled situation. So today, we will have an opportunity to hear a few religious leaders and representatives from the faith-based organizations who are from different countries, different religions or denominations, but they all share the same concern about the situation on the Korean Peninsula and hope for a solution. Now I'd like to explain about the format of our webinar. First, we will have our distinguished panelists to give their presentations for about 8-10 minutes each, and then we will have a question and answer session. So please feel free to ask your questions. To do that, use the chat icon for comments and discussion and the Q&A icon for question. Now, allow me to introduce our first distinguished speaker, Archpriest Vladimir Fedorov, Scientific Director of the Institute of the Study of Orthodox Resources for Peace Building, Peacemaking, Missiology, Ecumenism, and New Religious Movements. He is an Archpriest of the Russian Orthodox Church. For 5 years, Archpriest Vladimir Fedorov was a consultant to the World Council of Churches on theological education in Central and East Europe. Unfortunately, Father Vladimir cannot be with us today due to COVID-19, but he sent us a recorded video message for which we are very grateful to him and we wish him a quick recovery. So now let us see the speech from Archpriest Vladimir Fedorov.
Дорогие досточтимые участники,
respected participants of this webinar.
позвольте мне, как
Let me, as a participant of Orthodox faith, share my ideas about what is important to be aware of today at the beginning of the process of unification of the two Koreas. Indeed, a new era of peace is dawning and new hope are emerging. But we need to soberly assess the situation because it's not so easy to overcome so many decades of separation and division. One of the main issues, in my opinion, for Christian mentality and for religious mentality in general is that it will be a clash between a society with atheistic ideology and rather religious, you may say, society with active Christianity and with many other religions. And from the Russian experience, some comments should be made regarding this situation, as I see it, after the liberalization of political life in Russia in 1991, a lot of opportunities opened up for religious movements, religious preachers from all over the world to come to Russia. And in Russia, there was a large influx of both Christian and non-Christian religious movements. And societies that has long existed with an imposed atheistic ideology has come across the experience of meeting religious movements, variety of religious preachers. And here it turned out that there is a problem, the problem of freedom of conscience. Many thought that as soon as people were told some moral norms and values and said that these were commandments that should be followed, then miraculously the society will be transformed. But they forgot that this is possible only if a person accepts these values as his own, in his or her heart, with faith, with all his being, and which is more important, freely, not because he was told to live according to these commandments. Given these circumstances, it must be recognized that one of the main tasks in the process of unification is the organization of the life of society, so that it exists in a culture of peace. Peace is a value both for Christians and for other religions, and even for not religious people. Today, you may say that humanity is facing a choice that has to be made. Very difficult choice. It's to confront threats and to act creatively so that these threats do not materialize, not come true, be it pandemic or world war or environmental disasters. And such global problems oblige us to unite. All people for whom these threats are real must cooperate, must work with each other, regardless of the confessional or ideological background. And I remember how a quarter of a century ago, one might say, struggled with the influx of new religious movements, which was natural. But today I understand that there are controversial religions, there are just different religions, but there are people who are deeply convinced and sincerely believe in what that is unacceptable and alien to me. But they exist, and I need to work and cooperate with them. Actually, it is my necessity, because when there is a flood or any kind of disaster and we are clearing the rubble, we do not think who is the person next to us. We are, what are his convictions or religion? We just work in solidarity and trying to solve problems together. And it is important to realize the need for religion pluralism. Unfortunately, pluralism is sometimes misunderstood, especially in our country. People consider it to be an indifferent mixture of incompatible beliefs. But in reality, it is an admission that there are other religions, other views, and this reality of this diversity must be accepted. And such things as freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, and religious pluralism, they are largely revealed and understood to people who remember that man was created in the image and likeness of God. This understanding that man was created in the image and likeness of God, common both in Jewish and Christian traditions based on the Old Testament and the New Testament, they oblige us to recognize that all people, regardless of their enlightenment or beliefs, they still carry the image of God inside themselves. This is their potential, and this potential allows them to find the truth. And that is why it is very important to create opportunities for spiritual and moral enlightenment through different projects. The projects that will contribute to developing a culture of peace in the process of uniting the two Koreas. Because these are two societies that have matured in different cultural models. And this fact, of course, will have its own impact and effect on the future. And for the success of religious preaching and for the success of gaining a reliable, peaceful coexistence, free from political and economic conflicts, it is very important and necessary to help, especially the young generation, to integrate into this culture of peace, to make this culture their own. And there is an angelic message that we read in the Bible, in the New Testament. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace goodwill toward man. We should pay special attention to this phrase, goodwill toward man. This is a Slavic text, and it is often translated into modern Russian as a people of goodwill. And of course, in other languages, there might be some peculiarities and differences of translation, but still the meaning is the same. What is behind the words, people of goodwill? It seems to me that this is precisely about the fact that all those who profess peace as a value, a fundamental value, are called to work together, to work in solidarity, and to unite. And this explains my participation in the conference organized by the UPF. This is something that a quarter of a century ago I could not afford, because I was fearing how I will conduct a dialogue with those with whom I disagree, or with those I have nothing in common. And today I'm deeply convinced that every chance should be used for cooperation. And in the process of reconciliation between North and South Korea, this topic will be relevant all the time. How to hear a person with different convictions and views. How to share your faith with him. How to answer questions about our hope. This is a serious peacekeeping task, because peacemaking and peacekeeping is not only a process of ending bloody wars, but it is also a deep, active work for preventing conflicts. And this work includes huge activity in the sphere of education, in the culture of peace. So let's hope that the experience, sometimes even the negative experience of other societies that have gone through such and similar trials, will be useful. I say this on the basis of my engagement for more than a quarter of a century in studying of missiology, of thinking about what are the tasks of religious communities in the modern society. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Archpriest Vladimir Fedorov, for especially addressing the essence of missionary work and sharing with us the experience from the time when Russia has opened up after many years of communism. Surely this is a very valuable experience. Next, I would like to invite our speaker from the Republic of Korea, Reverend Dr. Stephen Kim, co-chairman of the Korean Clergy Leadership Conference from Seoul. Reverend Dr. Kim currently holds the positions of Director of the Global Network of Christian Ministers of Asia, President of the Seoul Presbyterian Seminary, President of the Xi'an Theological Seminary in China, Regional Director of the Assembly of the Korean Presbyterian Church, Professor of the Bethany Divinity College and Seminary, and the Senior Pastor of the Jesus Love Church. He is also the co-chair of the Korean Clergy Leadership Conference. Reverend Dr. Stephen Kim, the floor is yours, please.
Praise the Lord. Before I begin, I would like to first express my heartfelt gratitude to you all here from Europe and the Middle East for the prayers you have offered for peace on the Korean Peninsula, and for your active support and participation toward this cause. I also especially thank the leadership of UPF, Europe, and the Middle East, including its co-chair, Dr. Kasumi Oscar, and Dr. Jaku Marion, as well as other leaders. The Korean Peninsula has historically been an arena of struggle between world powers. So peace in Korea will have an important impact on peace across the world. The unification of the two Koreas can therefore play a big role toward world peace. World peace is God's will, and to achieve that will, peace on the Korean Peninsula through unification is essential. To better address the unification of the Korean Peninsula, we first examine the role German Christianity played to bring unification in Germany. The German church had played a central role in gathering strength and mobilizing German citizens in masses. At that time, the German church was not only engaged in evangelical and missionary work, but also played a social role for peace and unification, as well as its religious role to promote peace. In this context, there are Koreans who have been working hard for the reunification of the two Koreas. They are none other than Reverend Sun Myung Moon and Dr. Hak Ja-han Moon, who have been unfolding practical efforts and activities for the reunification of Korea. For I am Christian myself, I greatly sympathize with many aspects of their work for peace, regardless of my religious order. They are not only conducting mission work, but have gone beyond to conduct multifaceted activities for the establishment of permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. In particular, Reverend Moon and Dr. Hak Ja-han Moon have been building trust with the highest leadership of North Korea by keeping their words and terms of agreement. To give a specific example, in the field of economic cooperation, they established and operated the Pyeonghwa Motors manufacturer and the Botonggang Hotel. In terms of human exchange, they have hosted 5 inner Korean seminars for university students and promoted exchange between women leaders of North Korea and South Korea. Cultural exchanges and activity exchanges were also conducted in the fields of fine art and sport, such as Little Angels performing, boxing, and soccer. In the same manner, We can advance the day of unification if we set aside our religious and national differences, join hands, communicate, and work together. The Korean Christian Church also holds regular prayer meetings for the unification of two Koreas. We are also conducting activities that goes beyond the evangelical dimension. However, it is true that there are obvious difficulties and limitations here. Since North Korea does not actively recognize religion, there are no civilian groups based on the Christian faith in North Korea. I would now like to talk about the role Korean Christians can play in the reunification of the Korean Peninsula under these circumstances. From a Christian perspective, it is the demand of this time to prepare for the unification of the Korean Peninsula. How can we break down the bitter feelings and the differences that accumulated with the past 71 years of antagonism and hostility? This is a mission of this age that the Christian church must handle. Christianity is not an ideology or a political belief. It is essential for the Korean church to break away from the political boundaries and follow the gospel of Christ. The church must follow the biblical teaching. Therefore, Christian leaders must teach of love that transcends ideology and embrace enemies, teach of its practice, and set an example themselves. The type of unification that the Christian church desires is not unification in which one side dominates and oppresses the other, but the unification through the forgiveness and the reconciliation of the gospel of Christ, and the formation of an equal community where we embrace one another. Unification is not about forcing two different things to become one, but should aim for integration that restores perfection from what is separated and progresses toward greater perfection. This requires the theological but practical ability to achieve such unity. This is also one of the goals of Heavenly Unified Korea. For this purpose, educational materials must be developed, and through sermons and education, the foundation for unification must be firmly laid. Here are some roles and ways Christians can work for unity. Emphasizing the need for unification through preaching and education. Keeping congregations continuously interested in unification through the prayer meetings, seminars, and the special meetings. Continuing inner Korean exchange and cooperation. Teaching about Christianity, the teaching and the practice of love, applying them to the unification of the two Koreas. Development of textbooks, etc., containing the ideas of heavenly unified Korea for general Christians. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you for giving me this opportunity to give this presentation and to reflect over the role of religion in unifying the Korean Peninsula. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Kim. It was very important for us to hear from the representative of Korean people, the point of view of how we can help or what can be done to reunify the Korean people. As you said, world peace is God's will. So I am sure that now the whole world is hoping and watching that how the Korea can finally again become one, unified. Thank you again. And our next speaker would be Rabbi Kevin DeCarly, President of the Geneva Interfaith Intercultural Alliance of the Interfaith Youth Council from Switzerland. Rabbi Kevin DeCarly is a board member of the Council of the Theological Faculty's Center for Interreligious Studies and Interfaith Dialogue, and president of the Students' Body for Theological Studies at the University of Fribourg. Also in the Swiss Army, he is a staff member of the Military Pastoral Care Team with the rank of First Lieutenant. So, Rabbi DeCarly, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to start with a small correction. I finished my study 3 years ago, so I'm not the board member of the students' faculty anymore, but I'm the president of the Swiss Association for Friendship Between Christians and Jews, and representing Switzerland at the World Council of Christians and Jews. So as a small addendum, and I'm a commander in the Swiss Army, no longer a staff member in the Pastoral Council, but nevertheless, thank you very much for the invitation to speak at this event. I am honored to be able to share some insights with you, and hopefully we can bring these insights to a better and more peaceful world. Now, I am not an expert on Korea itself, but I gained some experience, especially in reconciliation between divided groups and people, both from my work with religious associations and states and in my work with people in the Swiss military. From that, I would like to share two insights with you. The first one regarding the question, who is needy and who is needed? And the second, what to do with factions that have differing opinions. Now, let's start with an example on a very personal level. In January, we were in an engagement in Switzerland because of the Corona crisis. A young soldier, he was just 18 years old at the time, just out of boot camp, asked me, his acting captain, for a personal conversation. He was working at the time in a COVID sector at a local hospital and said, "Sir, I did not ask to be here. I don't want any of that. I don't need that." What do you think my answer was? Well, I said, neither did I. I myself didn't even ask to be born. And yet I'm here. What do we make of that? The truth of the matter is, none of us needs to be here. But all of us are needed to be here. Needed by whom? Well, in the boys' case, the city needed our support for their hospitals. The army needed him to fill one of the roles of supporting sanitary or medical specialists. His parents, or all our parents, needed us to create a family. Ultimately, God needs us, so he created us. God needs us to bring his world and his creation to perfection. So the first insight is God is needy. The world is needy. We are needed. This is what being Jewish means. The affirmation that you and everyone is needed. Now, leading over to the question of religious, political, social, and other institutions. What is the issue there? Traditionally, what would we expect? What would the answer be? If someone comes bordering anxiety and depression and other issues, because all the needs that he feels he has, he needs to sleep, he needs to eat, he needs to get a job, he needs to make money, to buy a house, to pay the mortgage, to pay taxes. What is the traditional answer? You think you have problems now? Wait until you see what comes after this life. Wait until you hear what you need to do in order not to end up in a place far, far worse than this. Traditionally, they would load you with much more needs and thus depriving you of your very human nature and of your very human right to be needed. Okay, let's not go too harsh on religion then. Let's go to a political party, maybe a communist party, and ask the same question. What's the response? With all my needs, what is the problem? Their answer most likely would be, it's the others. It's the fascists, it's the communists, it's the blues, it's the greens, it's the immigrants, it's the rich, it's the poor, whatever. The others are cause of your need. They are responsible, they are the source of your problems, and thus depriving them of their human dignity. But now comes the catch. They will say, we need you to fight the others. And this is the cause for many more conflicts. In any case, this traditional process of building factions, of building separate units, states, communities, etc., is a process of dehumanization, or has been a process of dehumanization, either of oneself or of the assumed other. For instance, enslavement of Black people by Christian communities, especially in Europe and the United States, has been based on the story of Noah and his sons. God wills that these people of dark complexions are slaves. The same works with McCarthyism. Everyone who's not your opinion, he's a communist, he's a socialist, doesn't matter, he's evil. The same works with modern European and other left-wing institution. Everyone who does not agree, he is a fascist, he's a Nazi. Now, how do we reconcile this conflict of the personal and the institutional level? Judaism teaches that as we are nearing the 6th millennium, after the creation of Adam, in the Jewish calendar, we are in the year 5781. We are nearing the age of Messiah. What does that mean? It means that an old proverb finally gets the value it deserves. And religious leaders and institutions should be at the forefront of it. The proverb goes as such: Sei a Mensch. Be a human. Don't be religious. If we realize that we are not needy, but very much needed by God in himself. Isn't that empowering? And isn't that exactly what we need to take the energy out of those vicious political and other factionalist arguments? Historically, put no stock in religion, politics, or any other faction. By the word religion and ideology, we have seen the lunacy of fanatics of every denomination be called the will of God, reason, or whatever. But holiness in his right action and courage on behalf of those who cannot defend themselves, this is goodness. What God desires is this. God makes poor people. He needs us to give them charity. God makes people hungry. He needs us to feed them. God makes people sick. He needs us to heal them. God puts people in danger. He needs us to save them. God says people deserve punishment. He needs us to argue in their defense. He needs us to speak up against abuse and factionalism, and it is our responsibility as religious leaders to put an end to factionalism within our institution first, to stop religions act like they were political institutions, and not be religious, not be political. So don't be a Christian, don't be a Jew or a communist or a Republican or whatever. Sei ein Mensch. Recognize your basic humanity, your human dignity, and your being very much needed, even by God himself, in yourself and in others. Be a human first in every action, and then be Christian, be Jewish, be Buddhist, be whatever, but be a human first, and that to the very best degree that you can. Thank you very much. I hope this was helpful to you, and I'm looking forward to the questions and discussion in the last part.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Adokali, for very deep and full of personal experiences speech. Actually, one of the phrases really sunk into my mind. Everyone is needed, you said. These are very deep words, and I think the understanding of this is really needed for the unification process. Thank you very much. And our next speaker will be Mr. Heine Hanschen, Coordinator of Interreligious Association for Peace and Development for Europe and the Middle East. Mr. Heine Hanschen is a permanent representative of the Universal Peace Federation at the United Nations in Geneva and the director of the Geneva office for United Nations Relations. He is a co-founder of the Geneva Interfaith and Intercultural Alliance. Actually, Mr. Hanschen studied Korean language, history, and culture. And during his stay in Korea from 1993 to 1995, he was part of the Swiss Korean Business Council when Switzerland was the 5th largest investor in Korea. So, Mr. Hanschen, please, we are ready to hear you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on this panel. I would like to ask the techniques to make the PowerPoint. I have a PowerPoint presentation because I wanted to maybe illustrate a little bit some of these points that UPF as a faith-based organization has done, and also address the issue of faith-based organizations in general. What can they do? What can they contribute? So the Universal Peace Federation is an NGO in general consultative relations with ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council at the UN, and it can be seen as a key player in the field of peace and reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula. UPF is a faith-based organization. Because of the interreligious dimension, being so central and significant within UPF, the Interreligious Association for Peace and Development was created, this IAPD, as one of the key pillars of the Universal Peace Federation. Next slide, please. Yes, here we are. So what is IAP doing? Because I'm representing this organization, I want to just shortly give some information about it. Well, the idea would be to supplement the world's political leaders' perspective by the wisdom of the religious communities. In other words, give religion an importance in the world affairs. And the second point, it is, if you think about peace building in any sustainable way, we must understand that as only if the human being is in its entirety is understood and considered, means like also the spiritual dimension, then peace building makes sense and can be also, peace can be everlasting. So next slide. IAPD was founded, is relatively new in 2017, it was founded there. And it was always, the interreligious side of UPF was always very important. And we can see that in the following slides. But fundamentally, the specific primary association of Interreligious Federation for Association for Peace and Development was created only 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And okay, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, good.
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, I just saw myself frozen on the screen, so yeah. The next slide, please. In the year 2000, the World Assembly was hosted at the UN in New York by at that time, the president of the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, Ambassador Macari Revisono, famous man also, and well-known peace ambassador as well. And in this World Assembly, actually Dr. Moon gave a very important speech, and its main topic was empowering religion in the field of the international organizations. Let me quote here. Although secular authorities rule most human societies, religion lies at the heart of most national and cultural identities. In fact, religious faith and devotion have far greater importance than most people's hearts, in most people's hearts than do political loyalties. The time has come for religion to renew itself and manifest true leadership in the world. People of faith should feel responsibility for the plight, suffering, and injustices experienced by the world's peoples. The next slide, please. There were two relevant points that he especially emphasized that kept coming up after in the following years. The first one is the idea of the creation of an interreligious council at the United Nations. And from our previous speakers, we could already hear and understand how much it would be important to address the Korean issue, not only from a purely political perspective, but to bring in all that interfaith, faith leaders, faith-based organization can bring in. And in this sense, it has to be understood the Interreligious Council at the United Nations can really make a great difference. But the condition has to be that the religious leaders consider themselves, maybe as my colleague before said, not mainly religious in that religion or this religion, but consider themselves as peacemakers, as people who can do God's will, which is basically create peace on the world. And that point has to be understood in this proposal. The second point that Dr. Moon mentioned were peace zones, the suggestion of creating peace zones also in the DMZ, because we have these crisis places all over the world, and particularly the Korean Peninsula with the DMZ, with a stalemate since the end of the Korean War, is really still a terrible scar in humanity's history. And so he suggested to create peace zones on the Korean Peninsula in the DMZ. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now I want to just shortly, briefly address the question, faith-based organizations, what are the strong points? Now, maybe you already got some of the strong points that I mentioned before. First of all, one of the strong points is that religious leaders, at least, they teach to be moral, to be ethical, and to be genuine, and to be selfless. So this kind of contribution is very important, and motivation as well. And faith-based organization, because of that, or religious leaders, can aim to help a situation without personal gains or interest. There's a contribution, but no strings attached. So I think it's very important to see this genuine motivation that is behind the faith-based approach. The second point is religion and faith-based organizations can provide a vision out of the box. And this vision out of the box, like for instance, the idea of interreligious council or peace zone in the Korean Peninsula, has been given by a religious leader. Dr. Moon is a religious leader in his heart. Of course, he has done many other projects, but in his heart, he's a religious leader. So from his vision to create peace on the Korean Peninsula, concretely, he suggests something that indeed later was picked up even by the Korean government, and creating the Peace Park in the DMZ. Point number 3, religion and faith-based organizations, because they are ethically, they should be ethically clear and pure, they can basically make strong cases for helping in situations of crisis. The same way in the situation of the two Koreas, they can make a strong case because they understand that the suffering and the human condition of a people that was divided, not by their own fault, but by political decisions, and because of that, families were separated, relatives couldn't see each other for years and years and decades. So this is a suffering situation that has been for too long ongoing. So because of that, I think religions and faith-based organizations can make a strong case in this sense to help remedy this issue. Point number 4, the wisdom of religious leaders is important in resolving conflicts. Like when we hear Martin Luther King saying, basically, we can win over our enemies if we can win over our enmity first. And I think there are many resources in the traditions of the great religions that can be helpful, like was said before, also in solving conflicts, also particularly on the Korean Peninsula. Then point number 5, religion teaches the heart of compassion, and this way is really close to the human condition. I mentioned that it's connected. Humanitarian actions is in many ways the direct consequence of a faith-based approach. And point number 6, and this is maybe you will see, I have a very nice picture that exemplifies that very well. A faith-based approach can even succeed in reconciling between two irreconcilable parties. Next, please. So our slogan for IAPD is religions and faith-based organizations shall be part of the solution. Not can be, but shall be, should be. Next slide, please. UPF as a faith-based organization has been already working on so many levels to foster rapprochement between the two Koreas and could as well bring some appeasement in the very near future. I'm just maybe mentioning a few examples from Europe, from the UPF chapters in Europe, but there have been also worldwide many efforts made in Korea, but also throughout the world in support of solving this issue. In 2009, according to Dr. Moon's Millennium Declaration, efforts were made to promote the creation of a peace zone in the DMZ. This was concretely suggested at the UN in Geneva. It was an event organized by and co-sponsored by the Conference on Disarmament, the UNIDIR, the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, and also the governments of the Philippines and Indonesia. And then in 2014, next slide, please. Again, at the UN in Geneva, the project of Peace Zone was extended to the creation of a UN peace complex, of a peace park, UN peace complex, like we call it here, 5th UN office. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes. And with the participation of South Korean officials from the provincial and city governments of the region bordering with North Korea. So Gyeonggi-do was represented, Paju City was represented, and we were creating this, having this conference in co-sponsorship with these officials. And also media and NGOs, great interest was there for this conference at the UN in Geneva. In many ways, it stimulated then a continuous effort in trying to work out a substantial project for creating such a UN peace complex in the DMZ as a practical example of how innovative faith-based organizations can be also in solving a very difficult conflict like at the on the Korean Peninsula. Next slide, please. Yes, this is just a small illustration of this project. Next slide. So here I would just say it's a beautiful picture that illustrates reconciliation between irreconcilable parties. If we understand that Reverend Moon was actually incarcerated in the North Korean labor camp, and he was almost killed there during the 3 years of incredible, strenuous, mere survival in this labor camp. He finally, in 1992, decided to reconcile with the North Korean leader Kim Il-sung, which was at that time an extremely daring thing to do because there was no guarantee that he would be safe. So we could see a faith-based approach, a deep faith, and also a vision for a positive future can really go even beyond big barriers of ideology. So at the last slide, please. It's just a conclusion. I would say we as UPF and IAPD are committed to continue advocacy for the peaceful solution on the Korean Peninsula by using all possible tools and resources available and reminding all the important stakeholders, including governments, about the necessity to seek the common interest of the Korean people, meaning allowing them to live together in peace and harmony like everyone else. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanshin, for showing the strengths of faith-based approach and for explaining about the vision and even some steps which can be done for the unification of Korea. Now we've heard all our distinguished panelists, and let us start the Q&A session. Our first question is, are faith-based organizations still relevant in modern days in Korea? I guess this question would be for Reverend Dr. Kim.
Yes. Pardon me, please.
Okay, one more time the question. Are faith-based organizations still relevant in modern days Korea?
Yes. Yes. You mean I cannot understand what you're saying exactly.
Yeah, it means in modern Korea now, in our days, these faith-based organizations, are they still working? They have some meaning? Are they accepted by people? Do they have influence?
So you mean the Christianity still affected to the people?
Yes, yes, right. Yes, not only
Yes.
Christian, yeah, but especially Christian, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. We have some many positive affected by Christian church, but still many high percentage of Christianity in Korean people. So they are still affected to the people as a religious people to them.
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Next question is coming to us from Daler Nimatov. Okay, the question is like this. How can an atheistic North Korea join a God-believing South Korea? How do you imagine it? As they have completely different views on life, could it lead to interreligious conflicts? Whoever feels like answering. Can you imagine how these two Koreas can unite? Atheistic and religious one? Yes, please, Mr. Hanshin.
Yeah, I think we have to imagine that. We have to imagine that we can come together beyond the barriers of ideology, and interfaith has to be an issue that has to be addressed. I think we have this, of course, this confrontation between basically God-denying ideology of communism in North Korea, and very strict and authoritarian regime. And on the other hand, I believe there is still this long 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years of Korean history in Korean people's veins that is fundamentally actually looking for God, that is looking for for a faith-based perspective, that is looking for a solution based on religious terms. So I do think culture and religious are connected, and over these long periods, if you think communism is maybe 70 plus years old in North Korea, and it got rid of any kind of religion with a few exceptions. I heard unification is accepted in North Korea. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that we have a church or a temple there that is officially tolerated. I hope this is still the case. And I do think it just takes time. It has to be built up step by step. Like 50 years ago, interfaith perspective in Central Europe was not an issue. It was an issue between Catholics and Protestants and Jews, and Islam was not even, was not even here. So I think things can change, but we have to make a strong effort in advocacy and try to bridge these different perspectives by showing an example of understanding and of both sides. Yeah, I don't know if it answers.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, our next question is, it's about the resources which in general maybe religions and faith-based organizations have. Okay, the question is coming from France. What resources of religions and faith-based organizations can you see fit the process of the peaceful reunification of both Koreas? So, what do you think can be applied for the reunification of Korea? Any programs or resources which religions and faith-based organizations have? Yes, please, Rabbi Carly.
I think, as I tried to point out, religious institutions have the special liberty to look at human beings and their situation from an external point of view. They are not bound to political, religious, political, economical, and other issues like, for example, the state or parties or companies are. They have humanity and their relationship with God at its center. From that point of view, it is not important if the other one is a communist or not. I recognize him as a human. I recognize myself as a human. And from that point of view, they have the unique power and possibility by this divine human connection to overcome the institutionalized factions and borders that are being built up by referring to one single focus point.
Thank you. Yeah, would you like to add anything? Yeah, please, Mr. Hanshin.
Yes, I think especially it's faith-based organizations and religions in general have a great wealth in their faith traditions to deal with adversity. I mean, of course, we have seen religious wars, and that's exactly not what should have happened. But we have also seen other situations where we could see that actually religions were able to really avoid a big bloodbath, like for instance in South Africa. It was the input of a religious perspective based on Desmond Tutu's input that created a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa that basically brought the apartheid to an end. Of course, that was not the only thing, but it was revolutionary, where in many ways were points like confession of the perpetrators, like that the perpetrator could repent for his wrongdoings, not being judged, but actually could be led to a point where he or she could say, I'm sorry I did this, And I think religion has this great resource box or toolkit that can address reconciliation, that can address especially also the peace building and peacekeeping. There are all kinds of possibilities. Of course, they have to be shown and exemplified in practical deeds, but I'm sure Reverend Kim has a lot of these kind of things also understanding about this. So I don't know if he wants to say something there from the Christian perspective.
Yeah.
Actually, today, North and South Korea, the hotline telephone is reconnected today. During 14 months, we disconnected that hotline, the telephone line, but today we have reconnected that hotline, so we have get the right for communicate. I think if in Korea, politically or religious people need to patience to long time. We need that, and if we don't have lose the patience, then we cannot get the results. So I think if we patience, then we can have a good result in Korean Peninsula, and forgiveness and love. As a religious leader, needs to teach the people how we need to reunification in Korean Peninsula. Actually, the young people nowadays, they have many questions why we do need to reunification in Korea. They have some doubts about that. So it is the religious people needs to teach them why we need to reunification in Korean Peninsula. Because the Korean Peninsula is very important to connect with world peace, I think. So not even the Korean Peninsula, we need to aim to world peace. So we need to continually educate to the people why we need the reunification in Korean Peninsula, and we need to patience about that. The long time, the more, I think.
Thank you for these words. Actually, the way you answered also is connected to our next question. This question is coming from Thomas, I'm sorry, Grzizowski. The question is, how and what religious concepts can be a unifying factor and the basis in the process of the reunification of Korea and for world peace, I would add. Would you want to add anything about how and what religious concepts can be a unifying factor? Yes, please, Mr. Hanshin.
Well, one unifying factor, one could say, is compassion. Compassion and understanding that when we have families that are divided, that are separated, that have been without news, loved ones that couldn't get in touch with each other, brothers and sisters over 70 years couldn't meet, when we have parents who couldn't see their children since the Korean War. I mean, this kind of also fundamentally, I think compassion is a strong point that religion can teach. I agree with Reverend Kim that young people these days have maybe less this they feel this is not so much of an issue, Korean reunification, or maybe they feel it's too costly or too, it would mean we have to maybe share something with us. I don't know what is the reasoning, but as we could see in the German reunification, it's it's possible, and the long-term positive sides are really important. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody would like to add anything?
Would like to
Yes,
add
please.
something that has been pointed out by most of the speakers, this concept of a universal family, this fundamental insight that factionalism is not the norm, though it might be a natural thing to do because it is simple and it helps dividing the complicated world in which you live in clears, goods and bads and us and the others and etc. The religious insight that we are all created by God, that we are one human family, no matter the religion, the orientation, the belief, the culture, the color of the skin, the gender, can be a very strong unifying thought, because it means that a division is not, well, a status quo that we have to live with, but an issue that fundamentally touches us at our very heart, because we are divided from our brothers and sisters from the other side of the border, that we have this fundamental need, that we are needed to reconnect to them, even if it may be the more difficult way to go.
Thank you. Thank you for your answers. I have one more question maybe before we finish our webinar. It's a bit difficult question, but I will still ask this question. To what extent, this is a question from Walter Marauf, to what extent have religions accepted that communism is a materialistic religion? Well, first of all, do you agree with that? And what's your opinion about this? Yes, yes, please, Mr. Hanchin.
Well, I've participated in a webinar not so long ago where an expert from Korea, knowing the North Korean situation well, said, well, there's no religion there. Whatever this Juche ideology is not a religion. But communism, I think it's an ideology, and ideology that denies, of course, the religion, but it can play on religious fervor. And Korean people have a lot of religious fervor. That can be true. Now, I don't know if we are dealing with sorry, the point of the question was, specific point is, can you repeat the one last point that you said?
Yes, sure. So to what extent have religions accepted that communism is a materialistic religion? Well, do you agree with this, that this is a materialistic religion or not?
No,
and,
I wouldn't say it's a religion, because I would say it plays on religious sentiments, and but it's not, it's an ideology rather than a religion. There's no there's no God, so a no God religion sounds a little bit funny. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe my co-speakers would disagree, but I don't see it as a religion. I see it as an ideology that actually is an anti-religion, yeah, or anti-religious ideology. Yeah.
I would even say maybe that till the moment we try to explain, like, is it an ideology or is it a religion, and go in all these explanations, maybe it would be hard to really understand people in North Korea and find a way to work with them. And if you allow me, I would bring attention again of the words of Reverend Dr. Stephen Kim, that in fact the mission maybe of the religion in our days now in many ways is to educate, to give spiritual education. I mean, it's always have been, right? to give this spiritual education to the young people, so that people really can get understanding of why it is important to go over the economic reasons or whatever problems may come. But spiritual dimension can really help us to bring two people together, and not only this, the whole world together. So finishing this webinar, maybe I would like to ask if everyone can say like maybe one phrase or two phrases to finish our webinar. What would you like to address to the people, let's ask, of North Korea? What if now North Koreans are listening to you, what would you tell them? Just one or two phrases, and that's it, and we will finish.
Some years ago, I met one person from the North Korea. She is visited China some months. So she never heard about the religion, even the Christianity or Buddhism or anything religion. So some of my people try to introduce about Christianity to her. During 50 years, she never heard about God, about Jesus, about the other religion. But you know, at that time, I got the one calendar from the North Korea, and the calendar first page say like this: Kim Il-sung will be with us forever. Kim Il-sung will be with us forever, like as a God. God will be with us forever, but instead of God, say about Kim Il-sung like that. So that's, I think it is a kind of religion, communist. But I wanted to say like this, I wanted to say this. We try to give the information about the God, and maybe 3 or 4 hours, then she accepted God. She accepted the concept of God. She said, how can I explain to my daughter in North Korea when I back to North Korea? So I think that's why the spiritual needs, spiritual thinking, spiritual effect is everybody needs fundamentally, basically. So even if nowadays the North Korea has not based on the religion base, but I think I have, and we can have hope to them. It's even if 50 years they don't hear about the God, but in hours, in 5 hours, she accepted God, concept of God. So still, we have a hope of a spirituality of North Korea. So if spirituality and the religious, they can have that, then we can have a hope to reunification with the religious. They cannot agree politically, but we can get one mind at the spiritually part. I think. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Thank you very much. Rabbi Carly, would you say a few words?
Yes, it is. I just realized today, exactly 10 years ago, I was in China. And it was the end of a 3-month stay in China when I was a youth delegate at the Model United Youth Conference in Beijing. And exactly now, 24th to 28th July was the conference. And there we had a North Korean delegation that I was working with because we were in the same, I don't know exactly what group. And we came to the topic of religion because I was wearing my kippah and my tefillin. And I said, and they asked me, what does your religion mean to you? And what does your religion mean for me? And I said, well, it means that if you are hungry or if you don't know where to sleep, you can always come to my house. You will find a bed, a shower, and a warm meal. And then we will see where we can, how we can help you. And I said, well, this is religion? I said, well, this is what my religion makes me do. And for you, it means if you need something, you can come to me. You will get food, a bed, and a shower. And from there on, we will see. And this is all that is necessary because my religion compels me to be a better human. And it compels me to help you to be a better human in your very own right as well.
Thank you. Amazing. Thank you. And Mr. Hanshin?
Yeah, for me, one of the points that I wanted to make also in my presentation is blood is thicker than water. That is a famous saying that Dr. Moon applied when he went to North Korea, that he showing his determination to no matter what he was going to reconcile with his elder brother who was actually at one point his torturer. So I think we have to understand we have our common humanity, and no matter what ideology we are following, but there is our common humanity, and we deserve each other's dignity, take care of each other, and really understand blood is thicker than water.
Thank you. That's true. Okay, so our webinar is coming to its end. And now I would like to ask our panelists and the organizing team to turn on your cameras and give us a big smile for a photo. And thank you all very much for this great time we had together. And surely we will have more time together in future. And I would like to also remind everyone that we'll have our next session coming very soon at 4 p.m. Central European time. And the title of this session would be The Power of Humanitarian Initiatives in Overcoming the Division of the Korean Peninsula. So thank you very much and enjoy the next session and other days. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.